Well, hello Internet, and welcome to part 2 of my AngularJS tutorial. Once again, I'm going to continue teaching AngularJS by providing a ton of examples, and in this tutorial we're going to focus in on teaching form validation using rootScope to share data between controllers. I'm also going to cover controller inheritance, filters, as well as how to create custom filters, and of course if you haven't watched part 1 of this tutorial series, you absolutely have to, otherwise you might be quite confused. And just like always, all the code is available in a link in the description underneath the video. So I have a lot to do, so let's get into it. Okay, just like in the previous tutorial, I have the Atom text editor over here, and I have Google Chrome over here, and this is where I'm going to write all of my code. I'm going to start off here by adding in another style, and you can see all the styles and everything. You know what cloak does. You've seen that before. You can pause the screen if you want to type all that in, or of course you could get the code. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a style. There's something called ngDirty, and what that means is whenever an input box or element is going to be edited in some way, it's going to change ngDirty to true. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say that I want to change the style on the input if ngDirty is indeed true and the information inside of it is also considered invalid. We'll get more into that here in a second. And I'm going to say that I want to change the border color on that input box to red. Okay, so just some simple styling there. Now I'm going to come down here and start working with our controller. So I'm going to define a div inside of here, and I'm going to go ngController is going to be equal to, and I'm going to do glist controller. This is going to be a grocery list that we'll be able to add to. I'm going to do a little bit of review, of course, just because that's going to help a lot, and then I'll get into nothing but brand new information. So we're going to have our grocery list. I'm going to create a table inside of this, and let's go and have a table heading and a table row, and then we're going to have an item, which is going to be some type of grocery item, and then we're going to also say whether that grocery item has been purchased or not, and then we're going to close off our heading section. And then inside of this we are going to use ngRepeat, just like we did previously. And we're going to cycle through and get our different grocery items and have them populate our table and groceries, and then close that off. And then inside of here we'll have each of the grocery items automatically thrown inside of there. So grocery item, and I'm going to create those in the JavaScript part here in a second. And before I close that off, I'm also going to come in here and throw this in between TD tags, and then I'm also going to come in and throw in a checkbox on whether the item has been purchased or not. And here I'm going to have this be a checkbox. Then I want to bind my checkbox to my data model, so I'm going to go ngModel equal to, and I'm going to go grocery purchased, and of course close that off. And then underneath of this, let's close off our table altogether. And I'm also going to allow the user to enter in new information. So let's throw in a label, and we'll have this be new item. And then we could throw an input box inside of here. We'll go and have whether it's been purchased or not. We'll just have it by default be not purchased, because that makes sense. And we'll have this be new item. And then whenever they click on the button, that's automatically going to add this information into our scope. So we'll say ngClick, and then we're going to call the method add item and pass in the new item that they just added in there. And then for this button text, we'll just have this be new item. And then if there's some type of error, we're also going to cover that. So we'll say if there is an error, we want to come in here and populate this. We're going to get a lot more complicated here whenever we get form validation, but this is just going to be sort of like a look into the world of form validation. And of course, this is where we're going to pull in the AngularJS library as well as our JS file. Make sure that this matches up with the name exam5.js. Now we'll jump over into exam5.js and start working with that. So of course we're going to need to come in here and create our controller, and it's going to have the same name as we defined right here. Sorry if this is a little bit basic for people that already know. This is where that's coming from, so I might as well just copy that, paste that inside of there, and then we'll go function, and we need to use scope, so we'll throw scope inside of there. And then we're going to throw some canned grocery items inside of here just to start off. So we'll just call this groceries, and then we'll create an array out of this. And just like we saw previously, we're going to have item, and we'll have something like tomatoes, and we're also going to check if the item has been purchased or not. So we're going to say purchased, and by default we're going to have those all be false, and throw a couple more grocery items inside of there. And then we're going to have to catch anytime we receive a new item, as we saw over here. Whenever we click on this button down here, this guy right here, we're going to have to create this add item inside of our JS code. So I'm going to say scope dot add item, and we'll define that function, and we'll just leave the name be the same, new item, and then we'll do some validation here to make sure that everything looks okay. So we can check that our inbox has a value, so we could do something like if not, and then we'll go new item is equal to undefined, and then or new item doesn't have a value. So we're basically checking that neither of those are going to be true. In that situation, we know we can add in our new item to our array. So we'll just throw this on our groceries array, push it on, and then we can just say item, new item, and we'll go and put purchased. By default is going to be false. And then we can come in and go with scope again, and since we didn't have an error that we want to print out, we can just set this missing new item error, and we can just set that to nothing. Doing a lot of reviewing here while at the same time covering a couple new things as well. And then in a situation which we do have an error, which would occur if any of those things were true, we want to come in here and change the value of that, and of course that's automatically going to update. And we'll say something like please enter an item, just to keep that nice and simple. And if we reload it, you can see right here, grocery list. Now let's shrink that down a little bit. Hopefully you can still see that. So we'll see grocery list, tomatoes, potatoes, da 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 da. Let's say we click on add item. You can see please enter an item pops up there. That's this guy right here. And otherwise we could come in and say something like lettuce, and you can see lettuce went in there. Alright, so that's one way that we can add items to different arrays, and doing some error checking as well, which is quite useful to know. So now let's get into a little bit more complicated types of form validation now that we have the basics of that down. So I'm jumping back over inside of here again, and of course we're going to have to create a new controller for ourselves. So let's go in and say div ng controller is equal to, and user control. Put that in there so we know what we're looking at. Alright, so what we're going to do here is we're going to create a form, and this is going to pass our user data to a method called saveUser, and we're going to do a whole bunch of different things with form validation here. First off, I'm going to give this the name of user form, which is going to be important because we need to refer to that, and then we'll also define where we're going to be submitting this data, and that's going to be in a method we're going to create here in a moment called saveUser, and we're going to pass over user info inside of it. Close that off, and then close off our form. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to receive a first name, and what we want to define also is whenever they enter a first name that the length of the first name is at least 2 characters in length. Well, the first thing we're going to need to do is do a label, and we'll just do first name just to keep that simple. And then we're going to define an input box that we're going to be able to work with here, and we're going to give this a name of fname. The model for this is going to be equal to user info fname, and then we can define some requirements we want to have inside of here. So let's say that we want this to be required for them to be able to submit the information. Well, we just go ng required true, and that's set. And then remember, we also wanted to make sure that the minimum length of the data that they entered is going to be, make sure you put a space in between there, is going to be, have a minimum length of 2. And there we did. We got that all set up. Now we can come down here and create a span, and this is basically going to cover our error messages that we want displayed if they don't follow rules that we're going to be defining. And we're basically going to say, that ng show, which means show the error message. That's what we're saying here. This is going to show if user form, remember I said we're going to have to define our form here. So user form, this is what we're referring to right here. User form dot fname dirty, which means that it has been entered, and this error message is going to show if the input box has been changed in some way, as well as if the user form dot fname error required. So if it's a required piece of data that we need and the user form has been entered or the input element has been changed in some way, then we want to output this error message. So we'll say something like must enter a first name, and then we'll close off our span. And there you go, there's some error checking. And we can also throw in another span, and what this span is going to do is it's going to be a special error message that's going to show up if the minimum length requirements haven't been met. So we're going to do pretty much exactly the same thing. Might as well just copy this, paste that inside of there. We're going to have this be error message again, and in this situation we're going to go user form dirty. We're going to check that it has been changed, and then down here we'll just go fname error, and then the error that we're looking for in this situation is that the minimum length requirements have been met, and that's fine. And then we'll just say must be a minimum of 2 characters. Sorry if there's anybody out there in the world that only has 1 character in their name, whatever. Alright, so we have that all set up so that we will be able to validate the first name for our people that are entering information. I can just come in here and copy this because I'm going to do the same exact thing for our last name. Let's just paste that in there. There we go. And the thing here, of course, we want to come in and change this to last name. So basically everywhere we have F, we're going to change that to L. Okay, so we're doing validation on the first and last name. The first one was kind of interesting, but the last name got a little bit boring, so let's do something else. Now we're going to come in here and do some validation on the street that they're going to enter for us. So we're going to say street and create a label for that, and you can do some really neat validation. So we'll say, again, this is going to be text, and we'll give it the name of street. And once again, we're going to do ng model is equal to, and we're going to have this tied to that form again, user info, and we're going to tie that to the user info object again. So user info street. We're going to say that this is going to be required again, of course. In this situation, we're going to say that the min length, and there's also a max length, which is just ng max length, and we'll just say that this has to be 6. And then what's really neat is we can throw in a regular expression that we want to check the data against, and we can just throw in a regular expression that we know is going to work for us. And I have tutorials on regular expressions if you want to know what all this stuff means, but I'm just not going to cover that at this point in time. And then we can cover our error messages that are going to display. So once again, class error message. This is going to show in this situation, just like previously, if user form street has been changed, which means it's going to come back positive with dirty, and user form street comes back as invalid. And we'll say something like must enter a number, street, and street type, and then we'll do like an example for them, and then finally we'll close off that span. Now let's say we want to do some validation on a checkbox. Well, we can just go label like it's a subscription based thing, if they want to subscribe to something or not. We can do that, and then we'll do input type is equal to checkbox. Name is going to be equal to subscribe. The ng model is going to be user info. We're going to tie that to that object once again, and subscribe. And then we're going to say that the value that we want to assign to this checkbox, if it is checked as true, is going to be the word subscribe. We can also come in and define the value that's going to be associated if this is unchecked. And in that situation, well, first off, we're going to make sure we put single quotes up here around this, and single quotes around this. And then the value is going to be don't subscribe. Make sure you backslash that, and then close off that checkbox. And in this situation, it doesn't make sense for us to say that we require it, because then we wouldn't be able to get input if they didn't subscribe. So that's the reason why we didn't require that. Let's come in here and define a delivery method. Like, let's say this is some sort of newsletter or something they're subscribing to. I don't know. This is just something I'm making out of the top of my head. So we'll say a label once again, and we'll do a select box in this situation. So name is equal to, have this be the delivery option. ng model is going to be user info dot delivery. And then in this situation, we are going to require this. So we'll say required is equal to true. And then inside of here, we can define a couple different options. So the first one is that our newsletter is going to be delivered by email, and the section option, or the second option, is that it's going to be delivered by mail. So let's just change this to mail. So we're going to allow them to sign up for a snail mail newsletter. It's kind of silly, but whatever, just what came to mind. Close that select box off. Now, of course, we're also going to have a way for them to send us this information. So we'll come in here, and this type is going to be a submit, and let's give this a value of save. And if we want to disable the buttons, we can do that. So we'll say disabled is equal to, and here we can go and refer to the form itself, and if anything is invalid, which means that it hasn't been input, well, then the button will remain disabled until they enter all of our information that we asked for. And then the final thing we can do here is output all of our users directly on the screen so we can see that everything's working for us. So we'll just go li and do another ng repeat is equal to, and we'll say item in user, and then we'll output all of the different information that we want to output. Let's come in here and close that off first. So we can say something like user and with the username, and we'll get the first name for all of our different users, and we'll get our last name, of course, and the street address, whether they decided to subscribe or not, or how they decided to, as well as the delivery method that they chose. Do item delivery. And there we go. And that's all we're going to need on the HTML side. Now we're going to jump over into the JavaScript. Now we're going to need a new controller for all of this information we have here. And the name of our controller, where is it? Forgot what I even called it. It's user control, this guy right here. So let's create a new controller, app5 controller. And this is user controller function, and we're going to need scope again, and we'll go scope. Let's throw a user in here just to start off everything, just so that we see something. And I'll just use myself here, first name, come after this, and we're going to have to define the save user, of course, which is this guy. Let's go up to the top of the form, save user, and then we're going to pass in the user info object that's going to contain all of our information. So I'm going to have to come in here and define that, of course. So we'll say scope save user, and this function is going to be receiving our user information. And let's do a little bit of verification to make sure that this is okay. So we'll say something like if scope user form comes back as valid, well, then we can say scope user and push on the new information that was passed over to us, and that's going to be the first name. And how we get access to that first name information is just referring to the object that was passed over into this guy. So we'll go fname, and then we're going to do the same thing for all the other different parts. And there's all the other different pieces, and we could save that. And then let's say that we want to output a little message to our console, something like user saved, so that we can check that we actually saved a user. And then else, if there was something that was invalid, we want to output a little bit of information about it being invalid. So we'll just say error, and there we go. That's all of our code. Let's reload it. And there you can see all the new information that we have here. First name, last name, street, subscribe, da-da-da-da-da. Say something like Paul Smith, 234 Main Street, subscribe, delivery method, email. And you can see down here is all the other information I have down there. And I also see that I forgot to add a little bit of information in here, being the street. Say 123 Main Street. And let's reload it again. There you can see now all the information's down there. Oops, made a little bit of an error. Let's come back over here. This has to be minimum length, like that, and then those will all show up. Minimum length is fine right there. Min length, change that right there. Min length there is 6, and reload it. Now you can see if we reload it, if I type in P, must be a minimum of 2 characters, shows up right there. If I type in PA, you can see that that's now perfectly fine. We're also going to see the same sort of similar things right here. If we type in Smith, but if we come down here, you're also going to see that same error. And if we go and don't put anything in, must enter a last name is going to show up inside of there. So let's verify that. If we come in here and go 123 M, it's going to say that we have to enter in specific information. And if we type in main, that's still not going to work. Street, all of a sudden that goes away. There's no validation on the subscribe. You can see here that the button is still disabled because I haven't put in a delivery method, but if I put in a delivery method, that works. And if I hit on save, you're going to see that Paul Smith is automatically entered into our scope. So pretty cool stuff. Now I'm going to jump over and show you how to use rootScope to share data between two controllers. Okay, so now I just changed this to app6 and I'm in my Angular tut6.html file. Cloaks inside of there, don't need to do any other styling. This is going to be a real simple thing where we're basically going to be able to enter and then access information on superheroes. So just to keep it simple, I'm going to create a label. I want to have this be hero to search for. Let's close off our label. And there's going to be an input box. Type is going to be equal to text. And ng model is going to be equal to hero name, and then underneath that we're just going to have a button and add a click event to it, and the click event is going to call a method called getHeroData, which we're going to create in a second, and we'll just have this be submit, and then whenever we find this hero data, if we can, we're going to display it directly underneath of here, and that's it. That's going to be our first controller. Let's jump over and actually create all the code for that. So we'll go app6 and define our controller, and it's going to be called hero controller, of course, because that's what we called it over in our HTML file. So this is going to be a function, and this is going to receive scope, but it's also going to receive rootScope, and this is going to allow me to update information between two controllers, as you're going to see here in a second. You can't just do that with scope, because if you use a controller twice on one page, each controller has its own scope. So you can update the scopes using rootScope, but you can't do it with a shared regular old scope. Okay? Doesn't work that way. So we need to use rootScope if we want to be able to update information. So I'm going to throw in some canned superheroes here, and then after this we're going to have to define the function getHeroData for this guy. See, it was getHeroData, so we're going to have to define that guy as well. So we'll say scope getHeroData and function, and we're going to search through our array of superheroes. So I'm going to actually create this in a different function, so I'm going to call that function heroSearch and pass inside of it hero name that we're going to be searching for, and then let's create the function getHeroData. So we'll say function heroSearch. It's going to be passed a name to search for. I'm going to go scope heroData, and let's have it be not found by default, and then we'll search through everything. So to do that, we'll go variable I is equal to 0, and we're going to continue searching through here as long as we have heroes. So you're seeing here how to search through a list of arrays in a scope. So that's what I mean when I say and a whole lot more. So also we're going to say if scope hero I hero name is equal to the name that we are searching for, well then I'm going to go scope hero data is equal to scope hero I and get the real name for our hero plus, and then we could say is scope hero I and have the real name for our superhero, and that'll be displayed on our screen. But we also want a way for them to add heroes, so let's jump back over into Angular Tut 6, and for this we're going to use another controller. We're going to keep everything all in the same type of area. So we're going to have this be hero control once again, and here we're just going to allow them to enter a new hero name, so they'll have the hero name and then an input box, and then we'll have ng model is equal to hero name, and then we'll throw in another label because we're also going to have to get the hero's real name, this, and then we'll just change this to real name, and then we'll have to put in a button that's going to call for our function to execute. So we'll say whenever this button is clicked on, we want to call a function called add hero data, and it's going to be passed the real name as well as the hero name, and then we'll just give this add as a name and then button to close that off. That's all we need to do for the HTML. Let's jump over here and define our other controller, and then down inside of here what we're going to need to do is whenever a new hero is added, we're going to need to broadcast the update to the other controller's scope. So to do that, we're going to say scope add hero data function and real name and hero name, and then we'll have to go root scope, and we want to broadcast the change that we have a new hero being added, and we're going to call this broadcast hero updated, and then the information that we're going to be passing into this, close that off, and the new data is going to be real name, and then it's going to be real name again, and hero name and hero name again. And then we could just check if any errors come through, we can just go console log. Then we're going to have a way to catch this broadcast and then update the scope in both controllers. And to do that, we go scope on whenever there's a broadcast called hero updated. Hero updated is the name of it. Hero updated is what we got right there. Well, in the situation in which we have a broadcast and we catch it, catch an event, and we're also going to catch the arguments that are passed. These are the arguments that are passed, those guys down there. And to catch it, we'll go scope and we will push it onto our hero array. And we'll just go real name, colon, and to get it, we'll go args real name. That's how we get a hold of those. And then the hero name is going to be args hero name. Oop, have a little bug here. Go up here and make sure this is rootScope. Sorry about that. File save that, reload it. Hero to search for. If I type in Batman and hit submit, Bruce Wayne is Batman shows up there. If I type in Flash, submit, not found shows up. I can then go Flash and Barry Allen. I think that's how he spells his name. Add. And now if we come up here, have Flash, submit, Barry Allen is Flash. Okay, so that's how we use rootScope to be able to pass in data between two different controllers. And now I'm going to show you exactly how controller inheritance works. Now in explaining controller inheritance, I'm going to use an example that shows you just exactly how much this is like regular old object-oriented programming. So I'm going to create a controller. I'm going to call this main controller. And create our function here. And now what I'm going to do is define two fields that are going to be bound to this controller, and I'm going to use an example of what's called a scopeless controller using this instead of scope. So we can say this name, for example, and I'm going to use the classic animal explanation of how object-oriented programming works. So there you go. And then I'm also going to bind a method to this controller, and it's going to be called animal click. And whenever you click on this, it's going to output some information. And to keep this very simple, I'm just going to have an alert box pop up, and then we can output the name of the animal as well as the sound. Okay, so that's all we're going to do for that guy right there. Now I'm going to create another one. So app7 again, and controller. And this one is going to be a dog controller and function. And the controller service is going to allow us to instantiate a controller inside of another controller. So we're going to need that. So I'm going to say something like child controller is equal to this. And then I'm going to create an instance of our parent controller. So I'm going to go child controller, child is equal to, and here we can use controller, and then pass inside of it main control with our curly brackets. And then I can come in here and overwrite things. So let's say that I want to overwrite the parent name field. Well, I can just come in and go child controller, child name, and let's change the name for this guy to dog instead. There we go. I can also define a field for our child. So we'll just go child controller again, child bark is equal to wolf. We can also come in and extend the child controller by declaring our own methods. So let's go child controller and child, and let's create a function called dog data is equal to function, and we'll open up another alert box. And this is all we're going to do. This is enough to pretty much show mostly all that you'd ever want to know about this concept, this sound, and this bark. And there we go. And now we'll jump over into the HTML and show you how all of this is going to work. Okay, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to create a div, of course, and this is going to be our controller. And then I'm going to go main control, and I'll be able to refer to this as parent in this example. And now we can display some of the information that we have inside of this controller. So we could say name, and we could just refer to it as parent name, and that's going to output that on the screen for us. And we could also go and have sound, of course, because that's the other thing that we have saved inside of there. So let's change this to sound. And let's issue a button here and ng click. In this situation, we're going to refer to the animal click function that we created, which is going to output information about our animal in this situation. Animal data and button and then break. And that's all we're going to do with that, because I'm going to show you now what's going to happen with the other controller. As we'll just copy this paste that inside of there, and instead this is going to be dog control, and then we'll define this as dog. Doesn't really matter what that is. And now what we're going to be able to do is get access to that information by going dog child name, and then we'll also be able to come in and do the same thing, dog child sound, get access to that. We also do a button click, except here what we're going to do is call the parent method using the dog fields that have been updated. So we'll be able to come in and call our super controller, or however you want to refer to it as, by going dog child animal click, and that's going to call the other one, except I'm going to call this dog data. We're also going to be able to come in here and call the methods that are specific to our dog controller, and this is going to be dog child, and we'll instead say dog data. We'll just say more dog data for a button name. We're going to also be able to come in here and change field values. So we'll just go ng model and refer to dog child bark. We want to change the bark for our dog. And let's also output that change onto the screen. So we'll go new bark, and that's of course just going to be dog child bark. And if we save that and reload it, you're going to see right here, name animal sound gur dog data is going to open up the alert that says animal says gur. You're going to see here is the changed in dog as well as gur, even though we called the parent version of that method. Dog data, dog says gur, like that, and more dog data, and dog says gur and wolf. And we'll also be able to come in here and say wolf wolf and change those values. So there is an example on class inheritance. And now to finish off everything, I'm going to go into a deep example in regards to how we can use filters. So I'm going to have three files now. I'm going to have AngularTut8.html, filters.js, and exam8.js. And I'm going to have the filters.js file in the JS folder, of course. And basically, filters are going to allow us to transform data in the view without altering it in the scope. And to use filters, you're going to use the pipe character, as you're going to see in a second. So I'm going to create a controller again, and let's just keep this as main controller. And we could do something like convert whatever data we have here into uppercase. So we're going to take whatever input they provide to us and convert it into uppercase text. And let's just ng model is equal to, we'll just put name inside of there, and then paragraph, and we will output the uppercase version of whatever they gave to us. And to do that, we use the pipe character, that guy right there, and then we just put uppercase inside of there. And lowercase is going to be pretty much exactly the same. Let's go and just demonstrate that right out here. Let's convert this to a lowercase, and then just change this to lowercase. Oh, we might as well do a couple of these. Let's also go and cover currency, which is another filter. So we'll just change this to currency filter. You'll see what these do here in a second. Type mg model, we'll just have this be changed to money. And then here we'll change this to currency, and then we'll put in our money, and then we'll change this to currency. And there that is. And if we reload it, we can type in a name, and you can see there's uppercase as well as lowercase. And then here we could go and you can see that it automatically throws the $sign on there. So now let's take a look at what is referred to, oddly enough, as the filter. And what we're going to do here is output some information. So I'm going to have to jump over here and create some information in our JS file. So I went and threw in some dummy information. You can pause the screen here if you want to type all this in. Basically, I just created an array of objects that are going to have a name as well as a GPA. And you can see there's a student list as well, in which we have an array called GPAs with all those objects listed inside of there. I'm also defining a date as well as a random string and a random array. So we're going to be using all of those over in the HTML using a whole bunch of different filters. So let's save that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cycle through this information with an unordered list. So I'm going to use ng repeat to cycle through this information. And the information I want to cycle through is going to be student GPAs. So we come over here, student GPAs, this guy right here. That's what I'm going to be cycling through. And to do so, I'm going to go in student GPAs, and then here we'll have our filter, and I'm going to go student name, and then I want to order by GPA. So I'm going to list all the students out in order based off of what the GPA of the student is. Then we can come in and define our name. So we'll go name plus and get the student name that was saved inside of there. And just put a colon inside of there, GPA plus, and student, get the GPA for the student, and then close off that list item and reload it. And you can see right there all the students listed, and there are the GPAs. And if we want this to go in the opposite order, just put a negative sign inside of there and reload it. And now you can see it goes from the highest GPA to the lowest GPA. So there's the filter. We also have the number filter, which is kind of neat. Let's go in here and throw a label inside of there, number filter, and we'll get some input. And this is going to be regular text, ng model. And we'll just have this be number value, and then we'll throw in, there's a bunch of different things we can do here. We'll do the default, and we'll go number value, pipe, and number. Close that off, and I'll show you a couple other different ones here. Show you two different ones. We'll say here, if we don't want to have fractions, we'll say no fractions. And to use that, we have number, and then at the end of it, we put a colon and 0. That means no fractions. And then let's say that we want to have negative numbers with 4 decimal maximums. Do that, and then we'll just leave this be, well, let's change this to negative number so that now it's negative. And if we want it to be 4 maximum, there we are, and reload it. You can see the number filter over here, and I can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can see here no fractions show up, and here we limit this to, well, let's go and throw a 6 in here. You'll see this turns into a 6. You can see that it rounds, and there we are. So there's the number filter. We could play around with that a lot more. Let's go and create another filter, or look at another filter. This one is the date filter, and there are a ton of different things you can do with dates. But what I'm going to do here is just show you 2 examples. And we already have a date defined, so that's our current date. So I'm going to be manipulating our current date. So come in, get the current date, and call the date filter on this. And let's just do medium, just sort of like a default for this guy. And then let's go and do a more elaborate one. So say date 2, and here we'll go current date and a filter and a date. And then here we can define exactly what we want. So we could say month, day, year, and then if we want to say something like at, I want to put at in the middle there, make sure you put that little single quotes around that. And then we could say hours and minutes, and then our little attribute that's going to be AM or PM. And there's a link in the code to all the other different things we can do with the date filter. And you can see right there an example of how all of that's going to look. You could also use another filter called limit to, and that's going to allow us to limit things like strings. There's this string right here. I'm going to cut this down to only 10 characters. And then we're also going to do an example with this random array where we're going to cut that down or limit the number of items that get printed out on the screen. So we'll have our default, and our default is just going to print out on the string, out on the screen, and that's going to be the random string. And now I will apply a filter to it, and I'll say 10 characters is all that we want to display. So we'll go random string again and call our filter, and the filter is limit to, and we'll say we only want the first 10 characters to print out. And now we can go in here and also limit the array. So let's go and create an unordered list inside of here. ling repeat is equal to, cycle through our array in random array, and I just showed you a second ago what that's going to look like. And if we want to limit the number of items that come out on our screen, we just go limit to. Let's say we just want the first 3 items. That's how easy that is. And then we just want to output whatever the item is, close off that list item, close off that unordered list, close off that paragraph, and reload. And you can see right here, this has been cut down to only 10 characters, and then right here we're only getting the first 3 from the array because we used limit to. So now what we're going to do is create a custom filter. So let's go into filters.js, and what this filter is going to do is it's going to output different Unicode characters. I'm going to either show a sunshine picture or a umbrella depending upon weather information. So what we need to do to create a custom filter, once again this is going to be in filters.js in our JS folder, is we're going to create a module. So let's go Angular module, and I'm going to give it the name of weather filters. Weather filters doesn't have any dependencies. And then we're going to come in and go filter, and the name for the filter is raining. So basically this filter is saying is it raining or not, and it's going to react in different ways depending upon whether a variable or a value is equal to true or false. Define our function inside of here. Close that off, and then let's also close off the module itself. And then we're going to go return, depending upon input that we receive, input. And if the input value assigned, you're going to see what this means here in a second, comes back as true, we are going to return a Unicode character. Make sure you put this inside of single quotes. We're going to return a Unicode character of 2602, which is an umbrella. And otherwise, we are going to return a Unicode character, which is a sunshine, or the sun, or whatever. So real simple type of filter. Just wanted to give a real easy to understand example here. And now I need to go into here, and this is the exam8.js file. And I'm going to define different weather information. So scope weather is equal to, I'm going to throw two different objects inside of here. So let's say it's like a weather report for Monday. And then we're also going to have, is it going to rain, true or false? And then we're going to do exactly the same thing for Tuesday. Now save that, jump over into our HTML file. We'll just zoom up here so you can see everything. And let's create a paragraph. And we'll just define this as an unordered list. And then we'll cycle through the list items. Item in weather, which is that object array that we just created. And then we'll go item day plus, just throw like a colon inside of there. And then outside of that, here we're going to use our custom filter. And we'll go item rain, and we'll check if it's raining or not. And it's going to output different information depending upon whether that is true or false. You look at this again. See, this guy right here, that's what we're looking at. And raining is the name of our filter. So there's our filter. And then close off that list and save it and reload. And there was a little bit of an error, and the reason why there's an error is I forgot to come in here and include my filter. So I'm going to come in here and do that. So script source is equal to and JS filters.js. Close that off and close off the script tag. And if we reload it, you can see down here Monday is listed as a sun and Tuesday is listed as an umbrella. So there you go, guys. That is a ton of information about AngularJS. And I'm going to make at least one more video on AngularJS to cover everything else that I haven't covered so far. And before I leave, I want to thank all the people that are supporting me on Patreon. The reason why I'm able to continue making videos like that I'm making right here is because of all you guys, and I just wanted to say thank you. And like always, please leave your questions and comments below. Otherwise, till next time.